I never thought betrayal could sound so polished. There I was, sitting stiffly in the cherrywood chair of Harrington and Westlaw offices, flanked by marble walls and oil paintings of smug old men, when my stepmother cleared her throat like she was about to accept an Oscar. "I just think it's fair Victoria hears it now," Sophia Lancaster said, her voice coated in honey. "Charles and I updated the will before he passed. I'll be taking over everything. She's not mentioned." I didn't say a word. Not because I didn't have any, but because the world spun too fast for me to hold on to any thought at all. A lifetime. Every breakfast, every Sunday hike, every business lesson from my father collapsed into a deafening silence. Then it happened. Benjamin Cole, my father's lawyer of 30 years, pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose, looked straight at Sophia, and laughed. Not a polite chuckle. A genuine can't-hold-it-in belly laugh. Sophia blinked. "What's so funny?" "Oh, I'm sorry," Benjamin said, wiping tears. "You're mistaken." Her eyes narrowed, suddenly less triumphant. "What do you mean?" Benjamin shuffled his papers, voice cool and clear. "The company, the estate, it's not yours to take. Charles placed everything into an irrevocable trust over a year ago, naming Victoria as the sole beneficiary." The room went still. Sophia's face turned from glee to ghost, white panic in less than 5 seconds. I watched, breath frozen, as everything she thought she controlled unraveled in real time. If you've ever had someone try to erase your worth, your family, your legacy, just to lift themselves up, I want you to comment below. Your story matters. And if you believe justice still has a fighting chance, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories where the truth wins in the end. Before lawyers and trusts and stepmothers, there was just me and Dad. Charles Harrington wasn't just my father. He was my anchor. My earliest memories are of the scent of sawdust in his shirt after long days on job sites, and the way his voice softened when reading me "Goodnight Moon" for the 100th time. Mom died when I was 6. A car accident on a rainy freeway. She left for groceries and never came back. I remember the silence that followed. Deafening. Then came Dad. Rebuilding not just our home but our world. Bit by bit, hug by hug. While other dads outsourced parenthood to nannies and boarding schools, mine showed up. Every piano recital, soccer game, and science fair. Front row. He wasn't just present, he was proud. By age 12, I could read blueprints better than most interns. Sunday mornings weren't for cartoons, but for pancakes and project reports. He called it Harrington Business Brunch. I called it my favorite tradition. He never treated me like a princess. He raised me to be a partner. "Victoria," he'd say, "a legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's who you teach to carry the torch." And I carried it. In high school, I interned during summers at Harrington Developments, learning everything from foundation pours to zoning regulations. Dad never gave me a shortcut. If anything, he was tougher on me than anyone else. "You don't get respect because of your last name," he warned. "You earn it, twice over if you're a woman." Still, he never doubted me. Even when the boardroom turned cold or the markets got brutal, his belief in me was constant. When I got into Wharton, he cried. Actual tears. He hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe and whispered, "You're going to be better than me, and that's the point." Now, sitting in that lawyer's office, his voice echoed louder than Sophia's smug announcement ever could. He hadn't abandoned me. He'd equipped me. This legacy wasn't a gift. It was a torch I'd been training to carry since the moment my mother died and my father decided I was worth fighting for. If you were ever shaped by someone's quiet, consistent love, a parent, a mentor, a friend, tell me in the comments. Let's celebrate those who built us. I remember the first time I saw Sophia Lancaster. Not in real life, but in a glossy society page. She was standing next to Dad at the Harrington Children's Hospital Gala, dressed in a silver gown that sparkled under the lights. Elegant. Effortless. Like she belonged. I didn't know who she was yet, but 2 weeks later, Dad asked if he could bring a friend to our Sunday brunch. I said yes, without hesitation. He deserved companionship, joy, maybe even love again. I just didn't know what kind of woman he'd invited into our fortress. She arrived in a navy dress, heels that didn't make a sound, and a smile that could sell lies to a priest. "Victoria, darling," she said, kissing both my cheeks like we were lifelong friends. "Your father speaks of you constantly. I feel like I know you already." Her eyes didn't match her smile. Brunch was strained. She asked questions, but too carefully. Her compliments felt rehearsed. She knew real estate, Dad's business, even quoted his interviews. At first, I chalked it up to charm, but something about her was too perfect. Dad, of course, was enchanted. "She's smart, funny, knows the business. She gets me," he said over coffee one evening. "You'd like her if you gave her a chance." So I tried. When Sophia moved in 3 months later, I told myself it was fine. I was 26, living on my own. Dad had the right to be happy. But the changes came fast and sharp. The house was redecorated. Neutral grays and whites replaced family warmth. Our kitchen table, gone, replaced with something sleek and cold. My mother's photos vanished, tucked away somewhere, for preservation, Sophia claimed. Then came Cassidy, Sophia's daughter. Same age as me, but polar opposite. High, cheekboned, dismissive, obsessed with influencer culture and curating her aesthetic. She moved into the guest house without even saying hello. Dad, once laser-focused on our business, started missing meetings. Sophia convinced him to take mental health weekends. The company's direction grew fuzzy. So did his focus. Our Sunday breakfasts, replaced with brunches hosted by Sophia's friends, people who never worked a day in their lives, sipping mimosas and trading Botox tips. One afternoon, I stopped by unannounced. Sophia was on the phone in the library, unaware I was there. "No, the prenup isn't an issue," she whispered. "He's already moved most of the assets. The daughter, she won't be a problem. Trust me." I froze. The air thickened. I quietly backed away, heart pounding. Later that week, I confronted Dad. Not with accusations. Just concern. "Are you sure you're protecting yourself?" I asked gently. "I love you, and I want to make sure." He interrupted. "Victoria, I know what I'm doing. Some things I see clearer than you think." He squeezed my hand. "No matter what happens," he said, "you will always be my daughter. And I will always take care of you." I didn't understand it fully then. I wanted to believe he was just blinded by love. But Charles Harrington wasn't a fool. He'd built an empire brick by brick. He'd read thousands of contracts, dealt with ruthless competitors, survived 3 economic crashes. And he'd survived the greatest heartbreak of his life. Losing my mother. With grace. He saw more than he let on. Sophia thought she'd found a gullible old man with a soft spot for charm and beauty. But what she didn't know was that Charles Harrington had already lived through the worst day of his life. And nothing, no manipulative trophy wife or social climbing daughter, was going to break him again. He was buying time. Watching. Planning. And Sophia. She was walking straight into a storm she didn't even know was coming. If you've ever watched someone manipulate their way into a family or twist love into leverage, you know how powerless that feels. But trust me, the truth has teeth. And sometimes, it takes time to bite. It started with little things. Sophia insisted Dad change his cologne. "Too dated," she said. Then his clothes. Time for an upgrade. She repainted his home office, removing every trace of his past, including the vintage photographs of our first development project together. Soon, even his routine changed. He no longer drove his beloved '67 Corvette, the one we restored together over 3 summers. "Too flashy?" Sophia said. "Not CEO material." She replaced his driver, his assistant, even the housekeeper who'd been with our family since I was 10. Every familiar face was phased out, one by one, replaced by her people, polished, obedient, loyal to her. And then, she turned her gaze on me. "Victoria should consider a break from the company," she once suggested at dinner, slicing her steak with surgical precision. "She looks overwhelmed. A sabbatical could help her reset, find herself." Dad choked on his water. I froze. Sophia smiled like she was offering a solution, not an ambush. When that didn't work, she found subtler ways. She started inviting Cassidy to sit in on meetings I led. Cassidy, who knew nothing about real estate, would nod blankly through presentations, then offer remarks like, "Have we considered rebranding with more minimalist energy?" Dad, bless him, tried to keep the peace. But I could see the lines of stress deepening around his eyes. He'd always thrived in control, and now his world, his home, his company, his daughter, was being pulled in directions he didn't recognize. Yet he said nothing. Maybe he was afraid. Maybe he thought he could fix it. Or maybe he was waiting, watching, making his move in silence, like a man who knew he was playing a longer game. The tipping point came on a Saturday afternoon. I stopped by the estate to drop off some architectural blueprints. Dad was out, and Sophia was hosting one of her socialite garden parties. I wasn't invited. I walked around back and found my mother's rose garden, gone. Dug up. Replaced with a koi pond and polished stones. Mom planted those. I whispered aloud, stunned. Sophia appeared behind me holding a flute of champagne. They were overgrown, she said casually. We needed something more modern. Something snapped. You've erased her, I said, turning to face her. You've replaced the people he loved, rewritten this house, turned everything cold and calculated. For what? Control. She sipped her drink. For clarity. I stepped closer. You don't love him, you love his name, his money, the power, and it kills you that you can't control me. Her smile didn't even waver. Oh, Victoria. You're very smart, but smart doesn't always win. I left, hands shaking, chest burning. That night I called Dad. I need to talk to you, I said. Lone. We met at the marina, where we used to take the boat out when I was a kid. It was quiet, safe from her ears. I know, he said before I spoke. She's taking everything, I whispered, piece by piece. He looked out at the water. I let her. What? I blinked. I let her take the surface. Because that's all she'll ever see, appearances. She's obsessed with them. But the core, the foundation, he turned to me. That's protected. I didn't fully understand. Not yet, but I heard what he didn't say. Sophia was digging in the wrong place. And my father, the builder, the planner, the protector, had already laid the groundwork for something she could never touch. Something meant for me. Have you ever felt someone slowly trying to erase you? Not with violence, but with silence, with changes too small to fight but too deliberate to ignore? Drop it in the comments. I see you. And you're not crazy? It was Cassidy who finally pushed me over the edge. She'd been in the background for weeks, flitting around the estate like some kind of influencer fairy, taking selfies in Dad's library, trying to turn the wine cellar into a content space. At first, I ignored her. She was irrelevant. But then she started showing up at company functions, uninvited, and introducing herself as the future face of Harrington Developments. She even had business cards printed with a made-up title, Creative Expansion Officer. That was the final insult. I showed up to the estate unannounced one evening. Sophia was hosting yet another dinner party, this time for some up-and-coming luxury skincare brand. Everyone was wearing white linen and pretending they weren't desperate for attention. Dad looked exhausted, sitting at the far end of the table, smiling on cue. I waited until dessert. Can we talk? I asked him quietly, brushing past Cassidy and her ring light. Sophia rose from her seat. Victoria, if this is about the new PR strategy. It's not, I said, looking at Dad. It's personal. He nodded, excusing himself from the table and following me into his office. Or what used to be his office. Now it looked like a minimalist art gallery with no soul. I shut the door. She's branding herself as part of the company? I said. Your wife's daughter, who has zero qualifications and less than zero respect. Dad didn't argue. He just sat down, rubbing his temples. I know, he said. I've seen it. Then why aren't you saying anything? I asked. Why are you letting them erase everything? He looked up at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw the full weight of age in his eyes. Because I've already said everything that matters, he whispered. I frowned. What does that mean? It means, he said, voice low and steady, I've taken steps, quietly, carefully. This is noise. Let them enjoy the noise. I didn't fully grasp it then, but I trusted him. For now. Until 2 weeks later, when I found Sophia in Dad's study, the same office he'd retreated to for years to do his deepest thinking. Going through his files. Not just looking, photographing. What are you doing? I asked, stepping into the doorway. She didn't flinch. Organizing. Your father is disorganized. Someone has to manage the chaos. I walked straight to the desk and pulled the drawer shut. That's not your place. Her lips curled. Sweetheart, everything here is my place. Including your father. I stared at her. What exactly do you think this is? A con? A takeover? A personal project? She moved in closer, her perfume cloying. It's survival. And you've never had to do it, have you? Everything's always been handed to you. That's when I laughed. A low, bitter sound. Nothing's ever been handed to me, I said. Not even this fight, but trust me, I'll finish it. We stood inches apart, generations of entitlement versus grit, legacy versus illusion. Then Dad walked in. He paused, reading the room in one glance. Everything all right? He asked. Sophia turned first. Of course, darling. Victoria was just confused about a few things. He looked at me. I said nothing. Not because I was afraid, but because I realized something he already knew. Sophia had overplayed her hand. And Dad, the master strategist, was watching the board shift. The queen thought she'd captured the king, but she forgot about the pawn he'd been training to become something else entirely. It was a Tuesday when the call came. One of those ordinary days that splits your life into before and after. Pumpkin. Dad's voice croaked through the phone, trembling in a way I'd never heard before. I need you to come to Memorial Hospital. They found something. That something was stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The diagnosis hit like a freight train. The doctors spoke in hushed tones, using words like advanced, aggressive, inoperable. They gave him 6 months maybe. I felt the floor fall out from under me. He was 63, vibrant, running a multi-million-dollar company. Still golfing on weekends and driving his own car. How could he be dying? I took an immediate leave from work, moving into the hospital room like a second skin. I became his translator, advocate, and anchor. Roles he'd filled for me my whole life, now passed to me. Sophia, of course, was always there too. But something about her had shifted. She performed grief. Crying in front of nurses, wringing her hands for visitors, staging scenes of tragic devotion. She was always first to accept condolences and last to leave the room when someone important showed up. And yet, when it was just me and Dad, she'd find a reason to interrupt. Doctors say he needs rest. She'd say, ushering me out, too much stimulation isn't good. But the stimulation she referred to never included her or Cassidy, who floated in and out with glam squads and gift bags like the hospital room was a backstage VIP suite. I started keeping track of the people Sophia allowed in. Investors, socialites, journalists from local press. She was curating an image, the grieving wife of a powerful man fading too soon. Dad, though weaker by the day, noticed. She's planning something. He whispered one afternoon when she left for a facial appointment she couldn't reschedule. I don't know what, but she's too careful. That's when he asked me to meet with Benjamin, our family's attorney. Don't tell her, he said, voice thin. Just go, tomorrow. The next day, Benjamin's face was grave when he welcomed me into his office. Your father anticipated complications, he said, sliding a thick manila folder across the polished desk. This is the trust. Irrevocable. Signed 11 months ago. Inside were pages of legal documents, transfer of control, ownership realignment, emergency directives, everything meticulously crafted. He left the company to you, Benjamin explained, not just in name, but in legal control. Majority shares, board authority, asset distribution. It's untouchable. I stared at the signature on the final page, my father's familiar, firm handwriting. Does Sophia know? I asked. Benjamin shook his head. He made sure she wouldn't. Until the time was right. I left his office with the weight of an empire on my shoulders and the storm of grief swirling around my ankles. I didn't know whether to feel relief, sorrow, or panic. When I returned to the hospital, Sophia was already there, whispering instructions to nurses like she was the attending physician. She eyed me suspiciously. Where were you? She asked. Running errands? I replied. For Dad. She didn't press. But I knew she knew I was holding something she couldn't touch. Dad declined quickly after that. The treatments did more damage than good. Within weeks, he opted for hospice care at home. That's when the control Sophia had craved finally landed in her lap. Or so she thought. She dictated visitor schedules, rearranged the household staff, and began limiting even my access. Some days I'd arrive, only to be told he was too tired, even though I could hear his voice faintly down the hall. Once, she moved his oxygen tank into her room for monitoring. Another time, she changed the pain medication schedule without informing the nurse, but there were cracks in her performance. Cassidy grew restless. One night, I overheard her complaining that they'd wasted too much time on the boring phase and needed to lock in the paperwork already. It made me nauseous. Then, during one rare lucid window, Dad asked for me, alone. His skin was waxy, hands skeletal. But his eyes, they were still his. Everything's in place, he whispered, squeezing my hand. You're the only one who ever mattered, Victoria. Don't forget that. I nodded, fighting tears. 3 days later, he died in his sleep. I wasn't there. Sophia had called earlier that night and said he was having a bad day. It's better you don't come. By the time I got the call at 3:00 a.m., the body had already been transferred. Arrangements were already made. The obituary drafted, the funeral planned. Everything, without me. The funeral was a spectacle. Rented florals, classical quartets, high-profile guests. Sophia gave a weepy eulogy about their brief but eternal love. I was given 2 minutes to speak. Scheduled before most guests even arrived. It was like watching a performance of a life I knew wasn't hers to narrate. But the real show hadn't even started. 2 weeks later, at the reading of the will, I walked into Benjamin's office with a quiet heart and steel in my spine. Sophia and Cassidy were already there, seated confidently alongside Gregory Palmer, her personal attorney. They looked smug. Ready. Sophia leaned over and whispered, I made sure you get nothing. You're not ready, Victoria. This is bigger than you. Then Benjamin began reading. And the truth, the real truth, detonated like a bomb. She had no idea the man she thought she married had already outmaneuvered her. He hadn't just prepared for betrayal. He had preempted it. He gave her the show, the dress, the ring, the spotlight. But the empire, that was always meant for me. Benjamin's office had always felt like a time capsule. Dark wood paneling, leather, bound books, and a faint smell of tobacco from a pipe he probably hadn't smoked in years. But today the air was different. Tense. Loaded. I sat alone on one side of the long mahogany table. Sophia Cassidy and Gregory Palmer sat across from me, a perfectly curated front of legal confidence and icy detachment. Benjamin shuffled papers quietly. He looked calm, but I could tell something was simmering behind his wire-rimmed glasses. We are gathered. He began to read the last will and testament of Charles Harrington. He read slowly, methodically. To the housekeeper, 50,000. To his longtime driver, 25,000. To his favorite nonprofit foundations, significant donations. Sophia's eyes darted toward me with every name, every amount. The longer she didn't hear her own, the wider her smirk grew. Finally, to my beloved wife, Sophia Harrington. She straightened in her seat. Gregory folded his hands, ready for triumph. I leave the Harrington estate in Greenwich, its contents, and a monthly stipend of $28,000 for the remainder of her life. She blinked, paused, waited. Benjamin turned the page. That concludes the wills section regarding asset distribution. Silence. Then Sophia laughed, a high, brittle sound. There must be some confusion, she said sweetly. Charles updated the will before his passing. We made changes together. Benjamin raised a brow. Mrs. Harrington, I assure you, this document is the most current and legally binding version. No, she interrupted, standing. Gregory, explain. Didn't we revise? Gregory opened a folder, pulling out a different will. This was signed 3 months before Mr. Harrington's death. It supersedes any prior versions. Benjamin didn't even flinch. That would be relevant if the assets in question were still part of Charles's estate. What do you mean? Cassidy asked, sitting up. Simple. Benjamin said, removing his glasses and wiping them with a cloth. Most of Charles Harrington's assets, including controlling interest in Harrington Developments, were legally transferred into an irrevocable trust 11 months ago. He looked at me. With Victoria as the sole beneficiary, the room imploded. Cassidy gasped. Sophia paled. Gregory went silent. No, Sophia whispered. That can't be. That's not legal. It is, Benjamin said calmly, sliding a notarized document across the table. Signed, witnessed, and filed while Mr. Harrington was of sound mind and excellent health. This was before the diagnosis. I added quietly, watching her face break. Sophia snatched the document, scanning the pages like she could rewrite them with her eyes. He was manipulated? She cried, pointing at me. She turned him against me? Benjamin cleared his throat. Mrs. Harrington, I personally oversaw this transfer, and I assure you, Charles Harrington was sharper than ever during those meetings. Strategic. Thorough. Gregory opened his mouth, then closed it again. Benjamin leaned forward. A will can only dictate what's left in an estate at death. But those assets, the ones you're referring to, they haven't belonged to Charles for nearly a year. They've belonged to Victoria. For the first time, Sophia truly had no words. Cassidy, ever the brat, muttered, "This is unfair. We had plans." Benjamin smiled thinly. "I'm sure you did." Sophia collapsed back into her chair, stunned, and for the first time since Dad's death, I felt something crack open in my chest. Not victory, not vengeance. Just clarity. He'd seen everything, and he'd acted long before she ever thought to sharpen her knives. Benjamin continued, "There are also concerns about the most recent will presented by Mrs. Harrington. The signature appears inconsistent. If challenged, it would likely be invalidated due to questions of duress and motive." Sophia looked at Gregory, furious. He avoided her gaze. "I advise against contesting," Benjamin added. "We have video recordings, medical assessments, and Charles's personal journals. Should you pursue legal action, we'll respond with a full countersuit." There it was, the final wall. Sophia had reached the end of her game, and found out too late that she was never holding the cards. As the meeting ended, Sophia stood, face flushed and frozen. "I'll see you in court," she snapped. "You're welcome to try," Benjamin replied. Cassidy stormed out behind her. Benjamin turned to me once we were alone. "Your father asked me to give you this," he said, handing me an envelope. Inside was a letter, handwritten, dated just days after his diagnosis. He knew. He knew what she was, what she wanted, what she'd try to take. And he made sure I wouldn't have to fight for what I'd already earned. 3 weeks after the reading, the first lawsuit landed. Elaine, she'd dropped the pretense of Sophia. By then, filed claims of undue influence, diminished capacity, and elder exploitation. She painted me as a manipulative daughter who isolated a dying man and coerced him into changing his estate. I wish I could say I was shocked. But I wasn't. Benjamin wasn't either. "These are tactics," he said. "Delay, distract, deplete. The goal wasn't to win. It was to make me buckle. But I didn't." What followed were months of depositions, discovery demands, court hearings. She subpoenaed every financial document from the past 5 years, trying to find holes in Dad's accounting. Claimed I was hiding assets. Accused me of forging signatures. Even hinted I'd pressured the doctors. The media caught wind. Rumors swirled. Headlines whispered of scandal in the Harrington empire. I didn't break, because then, Benjamin found the journals. Dozens of leather-bound notebooks, kept in a locked drawer in Dad's private study. His handwriting, his thoughts. A record of everything. He'd documented it all. The shift in Elaine's behavior after they married. The subtle isolations. The way she redirected conversations. Her probing questions about trusts and company control. He had even noted specific dates. Like the day she suggested I take a sabbatical. And when Cassidy began shadowing investor meetings. But it was the entries from his diagnosis that hit hardest. "I'm not afraid to die," he wrote. "I'm afraid to leave Victoria unprotected." I wept reading those words. Those journals became the key. We submitted them as evidence, not out of spite, but out of necessity. The tide turned. Elaine's lawyers requested a settlement. She'd drop all claims in exchange for keeping the house and a small increase to her monthly allowance. I agreed. With one condition: a full non-disclosure agreement. She would never speak publicly about Dad, me, or the company again. It ended with silence, not a bang. 3 months after Dad's funeral, the war was over. Elaine signed the papers with shaking hands. Cassidy refused to speak to anyone, and I walked out of Benjamin's office free. Free to lead. Free to build. Free to grieve properly, for the first time, without watching my back. I didn't plan to see her again. Nearly a year had passed since the last courtroom door shut behind Elaine. Life had settled. Not quiet, exactly, but steady. The company was thriving. I'd moved out of the apartment and into a home of my own. I had routines, team meetings, even occasional peace. Then it happened. I was leaving a lunch meeting at Westfield's downtown, arms full of proposal folders, when I turned a corner in the lobby. And there she was. Elaine Lancaster Harrington, still impeccably dressed, still walking like she owned the air around her, but thinner. Paler. Older. We both froze. "Victoria," she said softly, almost a sigh. "Elaine," I replied, more neutral than I felt. "I'm surprised to see you here." I could say the same. She shifted her purse, avoiding my eyes. "I thought you were moving to Palm Beach," I added. She hesitated. Plans change. Translation: her settlement didn't buy the life she imagined. I didn't smile. I didn't, just nodded. "How's Cassidy?" I asked, mostly out of habit. Her jaw tensed. "In Europe. Indefinitely." Another translation. The gravy train had dried up. She looked at me again, and this time, really looked. "He loved you," she said quietly. "More than anything." I said nothing. Elaine inhaled sharply, as if searching for courage. "He saw through me from the beginning, didn't he?" The honesty in her voice caught me off guard. "Yes," I said. "He did." She closed her eyes, the words like a blow. "Then why did he stay?" she whispered. I thought for a long second. "Maybe because," I finally said, "after losing the love of his life, he chose familiar chaos over being alone. And maybe he wanted to protect me from the noise of a messy goodbye." She nodded slowly. "I did care for him. In my way." "I hope that's true," I replied. Then I turned and walked away, not in triumph, not in anger. Just done. And somehow in that moment, the past lost its hold. A year to the day after he died, I sat alone on the bench at Greenwich Point Park, Dad's thinking spot. The air was cool, the sky streaked with soft gold. In my lap, a portfolio, the finalized plans for Bennett Community Plaza, our most ambitious project yet. Affordable housing, green technology, public space, everything he believed in. I spoke out loud as if he were next to me. "We did it, Dad. Not just the legal fight, the real one. The one you started when you taught me how to read a zoning map instead of playing princess." I placed a copy of the plans on the bench beside me, next to a small glass of his favorite scotch. "You didn't just leave me a company. You left me courage. Clarity. A sense of purpose that doesn't bend to greed or fear." He'd prepared me for all of it. Not just with documents or trust funds, but with love, structure, discipline. The legacy he left behind wasn't measured in dollars. It lived in the families moving into homes we'd built, in the scholarships awarded through our foundation, in the employees who stood taller because they believed in the name behind their paycheck. And in me, the daughter he trusted enough to protect quietly, even when she didn't know she needed it. I whispered, "I hope I've made you proud." A breeze rolled through the trees. I took it as an answer. For those of you out there building something, a family, a dream, a life, remember, the most powerful legacies are the ones that build others. And if you've ever been underestimated, manipulated, or dismissed, let this be proof that strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it simply endures and outlasts them all.